If you were to venture today into the picturesque Crimean valley of Alsu, drive past Sevastopol towards Balaclava, and turn onto a barely noticeable old asphalt road into the dense forest at the foot of Mount Morozka, a startling and eerie sight would unfold before you. Among ancient trees and abandoned concrete structures, two colossal portals, camouflaged as fake two-story residential houses with windows painted onto the concrete, disappear into the monolithic rock. Hidden inside this mountain is an absolute phenomenon of Soviet military engineering. A four-story underground city carved into the strongest limestone massif at a depth of over 200 meters. This is Facility 221, known in the secret documents of the USSR Ministry of Defense as the Reserve Command Post of the Black Sea Fleet, and in popular legend and tourist folklore as Stalin's secret bunker and the reserve capital of the Soviet Union in the event of World War III. Let's immediately address the first mystery that researchers and historians have been fiercely debating for decades. Why is this titanic underground complex invariably associated in the public consciousness with the name of Joseph Stalin, even though its actual construction began much later? To answer this question, we must delve into the complex logic of the development of the Soviet fortification system and understand how the military strategy of the great leader transformed into the paranoid nuclear doctrine of the Cold War era. The roots of the idea to create unreachable underground command centers indeed go back to the era of the Great Patriotic War. Joseph Stalin was obsessed with the idea of maximum protection for high command posts. We remember well the famous Stalin bunker in Kuibyshev, built at a depth of 37 meters in 1941 in a record-breaking 9 months, while German tanks stood at the gates of Moscow. We know of the secret facilities in Izmailovo near Moscow and the underground command posts beneath the Kremlin and the base at the Kirovskaya metro station. In Crimea, during the defense of Sevastopol in 1941 to 1942, Soviet troops proved in practice the incredible effectiveness of deep underground structures. The Inkerman adits, the underground hospital at the Champagne Combine, the artillery magazines of the 30th and 35th Coastal Batteries withstood months of continuous bombardment by the Luftwaffe and shelling from super-heavy German artillery, including the giant 800mm Dora gun. After the victory in 1945 and the emergence of atomic weapons in the United States, Stalin personally initiated a large-scale program to build a new generation of underground facilities. It was under his rule that the design of Facility 825GTS began in Balaclava, an underground anti-nuclear complex for sheltering and repairing submarines hewn directly into the rock. However, the idea of creating not just a local headquarters in Crimea, but a full-fledged reserve capital and a main protected command node for the southern strategic direction in the event of a global conflict, was fully formed only in the 1970s. During the rule of Leonid Brezhnev, with Defense Minister Dmitry Ustinov and Navy Commander-in-Chief Sergei Gorshkov, the Soviet-American nuclear confrontation reached its peak. The concept of mutually assured destruction required both superpowers to ensure the flawless survivability of their nuclear command and control systems. If the enemy delivers a sudden, disarming first strike against Moscow and the main headquarters, the Soviet military machine must not lose its head. The Navy, strategic aviation, and missile complexes had to receive an order to deliver a devastating retaliatory strike from a fully protected, invulnerable center. It was precisely Sevastopol and the Crimean Peninsula that served as the key operational bridgehead for the USSR in the Black Sea region and the Mediterranean. From here, the command of the 5th Operational Squadron of the Soviet Navy, which opposed the U.S. 6th Fleet, was directed. In the event of a nuclear war, the Sevastopol naval base was guaranteed to become target number 1 for American Polaris and Trident ballistic missiles. Conventional ground command posts would have turned to radioactive ash in the first minutes of the conflict. The fleet and the country's leadership needed a fortress capable of withstanding direct megaton-class nuclear strikes. The choice fell on the massif of Mount Morozka in the area of the Alsu tract. This location possessed unique geological and strategic characteristics. The mountain is a monolithic massif of extremely dense Upper Jurassic limestone capable of absorbing and dispersing the colossal seismic energy from surface and underground nuclear explosions. The thickness of rock above the future bunker ranged from 180 to 220 meters of solid stone. No existing aerial bomb or missile warhead from the 1970s could penetrate such a natural armor. Furthermore, the mountain's height provided ideal conditions for deploying retractable antenna systems and long-range radio communication nodes, while proximity to Sevastopol allowed the High Command to evacuate to the bunker within minutes. Construction of Facility 221 began in 1977 and proceeded under conditions of the strictest secrecy, comparable to the development of the Soviet atomic project. To realize this grand design, a specialized construction directorate, number 528 of the USSR Ministry of Defense, was created. The work involved the best miners from Donbass, metro construction specialists from Moscow and Kharkiv, as well as special military construction battalions. All participants signed non-disclosure agreements for state secrets for a period of 25 years, and the activities of Su-528 were supervised by a special group of the KGB's military counterintelligence. To conceal the large-scale works from the American spy satellites of the KH-9 Hexagon and KH-11 Kennan series, which regularly flew over Crimea, an elaborate cover story was developed. The area around Mount Morozka was officially declared a site for construction troops exercises and the development of a stone quarry for civilian construction needs. The rocky soil extracted from the mountain's depths, over 200,000 cubic meters of crushed stone, was continuously sprayed and distributed across nearby quarries and road construction sites. This was done so that U.S. satellite reconnaissance could not calculate the true size of the underground voids based on the volume of spoil heaps. The scale of engineering genius invested in Facility 221 is staggering even today, when only bare concrete walls remain of the complex. Let's examine in detail the structure of this underground titan. Within the mountain's thickness, 2 parallel main transport tunnels were driven, the technological Entrance A and Entrance B. Each of these underground highways was over 500 meters long, with a cross-section allowing the free passage of heavy Ural trucks, armored personnel carriers, and mobile communication units. The tunnels led to the heart of the complex, 2 giant underground blocks, designated as Block A and Block B. Each was an autonomous 4-story building, erected inside artificially carved rock caves the height of a 5-story house. These blocks were constructed from high-strength, monolithic, reinforced concrete, and the buildings themselves did not directly touch the mountain's rock walls. They were installed on a special system of powerful, shock-absorbing supports and spring dampers. This was done so that during the colossal seismic shock from a nearby nuclear explosion, the vibration of the rock massif would not destroy the internal structures or disable sensitive electronic computing equipment and communication systems. The 2 main blocks were connected by technical posterns, linking passages, and multi-level transitions. From the upper floors of the blocks, two vertical technical shafts, each over 4 meters in diameter and about 180 meters high, extended to the summit of Mount Morozka. On the mountaintop, these shafts opened onto specially equipped, camouflaged platforms. Inside the shafts were systems for raising retractable antenna feeders, cable channels, and emergency staircases. If necessary, unique antenna devices could be deployed from these shafts to the surface, providing reliable radio communication in the very long and short wave bands, with nuclear-powered submarine cruisers in the depths of the world ocean, and with the General Staff in Moscow. The life support system for Facility 221 was designed to ensure the complex's complete autonomy for several months under conditions of total radioactive, chemical, and biological contamination of the surface. The underground city was equipped with its own diesel power station, with a capacity of several megawatts, for which huge tanks holding thousands of tons of diesel fuel and lubricants were carved into the rock. Drinking and technical water was supplied from deep underground artesian wells and stored in reinforced concrete reservoirs with a capacity of tens of thousands of cubic meters. The ventilation and air regeneration system deserves special attention. Facility 221 was supplied with multi-stage filtering and ventilation units capable of purifying outside air of nuclear dust and toxic substances. In the event of the external air intakes being completely sealed by automatic protective valves, the complex would switch to a closed-cycle regeneration system. Special equipment would chemically bind carbon dioxide and enrich the air with pure oxygen from high-pressure cylinders. The underground bunker could accommodate and provide all necessary living and working conditions for up to 1,500 people, from the fleet commander and officers of the operational command to support staff, communications personnel, and medical services. The tunnel entrances were sealed by a cascade of massive anti-nuclear airtight doors, each weighing from 10 to 25 tons. These steel gates, filled with special concrete, were equipped with powerful hydraulic and electric drives, as well as redundant manual mechanisms. They were capable of withstanding a shock wave with an overpressure of dozens of atmospheres, the fireball of a nuclear explosion, and preventing the penetration of radiation. Let us consider the operational purpose of this facility. Had the Cold War turned hot, Facility 221 would have become the command post not only for the Black Sea Fleet, but for the entire southern strategic theater of military operations. From here, from the depths of the Crimean bunker, colonel generals and admirals were to have directed operations to seize and control the Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits, coordinated troop movements in the Balkans and Transcaucasia, and issued launch orders for sea-based cruise and ballistic missiles. This was a fully fledged alternate command post for the Supreme High Command, designed for directing military operations on a planetary scale under conditions of a nuclear apocalypse. However, by the end of the 1980s, when the construction of Facility 221 was on the final stretch and the complex's completion level exceeded 90%, the global historical context began to change rapidly. And here we approach the most fascinating and dramatic stage of our analysis: the clash of various expert viewpoints on the role, cost, and advisability of this colossal project. Let us compare three fundamentally different versions and assessments of the history of Facility 221, currently put forward by military historians, Western analysts, and independent researchers. The first viewpoint is the official Soviet military strategic concept adhered to by the project's developers, the leadership of the USSR Ministry of Defense, and Navy admirals. According to this version, the construction of Facility 221 was an absolutely forced, vitally necessary, and strategically justified step. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, the United States deployed Pershing II intermediate-range ballistic missiles and BGM-109G Griffin cruise missiles in Europe. The flight time of the Pershing II from launch sites in West Germany to targets in the European part of the USSR was only 6 to 8 minutes. With such minimal flight time, any ground-based or poorly protected command echelon would be destroyed before the top leadership could even comprehend the fact of an attack. Proponents of this concept argue, Facility 221 was an integral part of the strategic stability system and a factor in preventing war. Only the existence of a guaranteed survivable underground command center capable of withstanding a direct nuclear strike and issuing a retaliatory order deprived the United States of any rationale for launching a preemptive disarming strike against Soviet bases in Crimea. From this perspective, every 5 billion Soviet rubles, an astronomical sum for that time, estimated for the construction, invested into Mount Morozka, honestly served their purpose. They held the world back from nuclear madness. However, a second viewpoint exists, actively championed by Western military analysts, threat assessment specialists, and a number of contemporary economic historical researchers. They call Facility 221 the brightest example of late Soviet military bureaucratic gigantomania, a strategic mistake, and a so-called white elephant, an insanely expensive facility that lost its real military value even before construction was completed. The critics' arguments appear quite convincing. Firstly, by the mid-1980s, the U.S. Armed Forces had made a qualitative leap in the accuracy of precision-guided weapons and reconnaissance technologies. The development of space-based optical, electronic, and radio-technical reconnaissance led to the precise coordinates of Entrance A and Entrance B, as well as the ventilation shafts of Facility 221, becoming known to the Pentagon long before the first electronic equipment was brought into the bunker. The emergence of high-voltage electromagnetic pulse concepts and the development of specialized concrete-piercing and penetrating munitions, so-called bunker busters, cast doubt on the absolute protection of even such deep facilities. A precision-guided cruise missile, flying directly into a tunnel portal or striking the ventilation shaft heads on the mountaintop, could block all exits and disable the air intake systems, turning the impregnable underground fortress into a trap for its own command. Secondly, analysts point to the catastrophic economic exhaustion of the USSR. In the 1980s, the Soviet Union was simultaneously building dozens of similar, super-protected underground complexes. The giant facility in Mount Yamantau, Beloretsk 16, suburban command posts near Chekhov, Chekhov 2, underground submarine bases and bunkers in Primoria, the north, and Kamchatka, colossal material resources, thousands of tons of scarce, high-strength rolled steel, cement, the best computing equipment, and power cables were being buried in the ground amidst a growing total shortage of consumer goods and the systemic crisis of the Soviet economy. From this perspective, the giant underground bunkers did not protect the USSR, but, on the contrary, undermined its economic backbone, hastening the collapse of the state from within. The third perspective, geopolitical and institutional, examines Facility 221 through the prism of the fatal collapse of statehood in 1991 and the subsequent tragedy of dividing the USSR's military legacy. This is the view of independent post-Soviet researchers who highlight the paradox. A grandiose engineering complex built to survive a nuclear hell was destroyed not by American missiles, but by bureaucratic indifference, betrayal, and legal chaos. By 1989 to 1991, Facility 221 was practically a finished masterpiece of military fortification. Power cables had been laid into the underground blocks, air filtration systems installed, massive anti-nuclear doors mounted, communication lines laid, interior spaces finished, and operational halls prepared for the installation of computing complexes. All that remained was to install the final electronic equipment and bring the facility to a state of combat readiness. But then 1991 arrived. The dissolution of the Soviet Union and the Belovezh Accords instantly turned the unfinished bunker into a problem nobody wanted. Crimea found itself part of an independent Ukraine, and the Black Sea Fleet was plunged into a multi-year agonizing process of division between Moscow and Kiev. Neither the young Ukrainian state, which was experiencing a severe economic crisis, nor the Russian Ministry of Defense, which at the time lacked clarity on the status of its facilities in Crimea, had the funds or the political will to maintain and complete this colossal underground facility. Simply mothballing and guarding an object of this scale required millions of dollars annually, a dedicated security battalion, and the continuous pumping of groundwater and ventilation. In 1992, work on Facility 221 was finally halted. The military construction units and security forces were withdrawn. The huge underground city was left completely defenseless, and so began the darkest, most shameful and tragic chapter in the history of Mount Morozka. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, Facility 221 was subjected to plunder on an incredible scale and of unimaginable barbarity. A criminal business of extracting and selling ferrous and non-ferrous metals flourished on the peninsula. Brigades of so-called black metal scavengers, equipped with industrial gas cutters, generators, and cargo vehicles, descended upon the underground bunker. Methodically, step by step, over 15 years, these scavengers destroyed what had been built by the labor of thousands of Soviet engineers and workers. Giant anti-nuclear doors weighing tens of tons were cut down and hauled away. Armored wall cladding was torn off, kilometers of copper power and telephone cables were dismantled. Cast iron tubbing segments were removed. Steel staircases in the 180-meter-deep shafts were cut out. Diesel generators, elements of ventilation systems, and water reservoirs were carted off. Thousands of tons of high-quality military-grade metal were cut into pieces and sold for a pittance to scrap yards and recycling centers. To burn the insulation off the copper cables, the looters lit giant bonfires inside the underground blocks, causing the walls of the once pristine operational halls and command posts to become permanently covered in a thick layer of black, toxic soot. Today, Facility 221 is a grand, gloomy, and mesmerizing underground ghost. The vast concrete caves of Block A and Block B gape with the empty sockets of doorways and torn reinforcement rods. The shafts leading to the mountain's summit have become treacherous pits. The facility has become a pilgrimage site for urban explorers, extreme tourists, and researchers of abandoned military secrets. A reminder of a civilization that possessed the technical prowess to move mountains, but failed to preserve its own state unity. Let us now summarize our investigation and look at the main historical and philosophical paradox of Facility 221. Before us stands a structure which, by its engineering design, strength, and scale, was meant to survive the apocalypse. Soviet designers and military builders created a facility capable of withstanding surface temperatures of millions of degrees, seismic shocks comparable to the most powerful earthquakes, and the total nuclear annihilation of the surrounding environment. The USSR's backup capital in the Crimean Mountains was built as an absolute guarantee of the state's survival at the pinnacle of human madness. And herein lies the main, staggering fact. This impregnable superfortress fell without a single shot being fired. It was defeated not by enemy cruise missiles, nor by American stealth bombers, nor by nuclear warheads. It was destroyed by the signatures of politicians on paper, the systemic collapse of the economy, and the ordinary blowtorches of marauders who dismantled the superpower's nuclear shield for scrap metal. And now I want to address you directly, the viewers who have walked this entire journey with me through the underground tunnels of Mount Morozka. Look at the arguments, figures, and documents we've examined today. Which conclusion seems to you the most historically just? Was Facility 221 the greatest triumph of Soviet engineering and an absolutely essential element of nuclear deterrence, thanks to which the Cold War never escalated into World War III? Or are the critics right in asserting that this bunker is a colossal monument to bureaucratic paranoia and a senseless waste of the nation's billions, which crippled the USSR's economy from within? Or perhaps the main tragedy of Facility 221 is a lesson to us all that no amount of solid rock and reinforced concrete walls can save a state if it loses the monolithic unity of its society and the meaning of its own existence. Weigh all the facts, consider this paradox, and be sure to write your opinion in the comments. Let's continue this historical discussion together.